Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Scientist Yechiel Krisch.
Hey, I know, careful. I know, I'm going low. I went low this time. I remembered. Hi, everybody. Hi. Good evening. We've been messing with the sound back and forth. Will anybody tell me if I'm making their ears bleed? Anybody in the back? We're okay? I am making your ears bleed. Oh, you're nodding because it's okay. Lower? Then let's lower the mic. This is about how loud I usually talk, so if this is the volume, we should lower it a little bit, right? No, I mean, Rabbi Brisky was sound testing, and he's meek and soft-spoken. I'm just kidding. I am Rabbi Yechiel Krisch. You don't have to call me Rabbi. It's fine. I have a background in science, and thank God a background in Torah as well. My science background is that I went to Yeshiva University. There I studied biology. I have a bachelor's in biology. I have 2 master's degrees. I assume if you collect enough of them, that equals a PhD. So I have several master's degrees I keep on collecting. One of them is in health sciences from Cornell University. Another one is in science communications, so I'd better be good at this, from New York University, from NYU. And for a period of time, I did cancer research. My main area is biomedicine, not necessarily the age of rocks, but a little evolutionary biology, so we'll call it a deal. When I did cancer biology, I was bad at it. That is very important because otherwise I wouldn't be here today. I, in a way, was the best cancer biologist you've ever met in your entire life. I cured cancer personally. I did. Yeah, that's right. And they never gave me any credit for it. My job in the laboratory was to make sure the cancer cells stayed alive long enough for us to do research on them. And every day I came into the lab and killed the cancer cells. So I was horrible at that lab research, but also technically my laboratory technique is the cure for cancer. If you could just bottle that stuff, we'd be done with it. In any event, when you're not good at lab research, you end up writing about science instead. So I went into science communications. I worked for the New York Times, which I assume about half of you can't stand. That's fine. Even those of you who don't like the New York Times probably like the Tuesday science section, so I make friends where I go. I worked on the Tuesday Insert the Science Times. I worked at a bunch of magazines you might have heard of. Popular Mechanics, I was doing the science there. I did Scientific American. I did The Atlantic. So a bunch of magazines writing about science. And right now I'm at the Rockefeller University, where I'm a communications professional. I write press releases. I bop around the 70-odd biomedical labs we have there, figure out what they're up to, and explain it to the world. So that's my science background. As far as Torah is concerned, I'm a rabbi. In addition to a rabbi, I'm a rabbinic judge. That's what you call being a dayan, right? I'm a rabbinic judge. What else, Rabbi? What else should I tell them? I got a lot of rabbi time and I got a lot of scientist time. So without further ado, why don't we stop talking about me? You can find it all online. ScienceTorah.com's got a big bio that I wrote about how incredible I am. I'm a pilot. I used to fly single-engine airplanes. I have a little bit of aerospace time. What else? Good? Let's do the age of the universe, yeah? Yeah. All right, before we all become the age of the universe. Tonight's topic is about a science-Torah conflict, when science and Torah do not get along, which is painful to many people because a lot of us like science and a lot of us like Torah. Not just like, it's our identity. Torah and Judaism is the identity of a Jew. That's our life force. And for a lot of us, science is either the most interesting thing we've ever read, or in some cases, our entire professions. I assume we have some scientists in the room, yeah? Scientists? Where are you? I assume that like half the room's doctors, right? I usually ask who's a doctor, who's a lawyer, who's an accountant, and who's a disappointment to their mother. There we got that. No, I ask it a lot, but no one ever raises their hand to volunteer that one. In any event, science is an important part of a lot of our lives, and so is Torah. So without further ado, why don't we work on a science-Torah conflict, the age of the universe. But before we work on a science-Torah conflict, where science and Torah just don't get along, I want to tell you something. They usually do get along. Science and Torah like each other a lot. I don't know how much science likes Torah. I haven't done a survey of science textbooks to see how enthusiastic the scientific community is about the 5 books of Moses. But I will tell you this. The Torah really likes science. The Torah does not have a problem with science. I put 4 sources up here, and usually my slides are not quite so crowded or coming off the bottom. But can I make it any, does it come down any further? Yeah. Let's make the projector go down a little further if you don't mind. Yeah, we're going to make the screen go down a little more. Don't worry, I'll keep talking while you're fixing it, even if you don't fix it. We'll try. Too excited, too happy to be here. No, that's the opposite. That's right. I demonstrate every time I speak that I am the science rabbi, not the technology rabbi. It's very obvious. See how the slides aren't usually this busy, but I had so many to show you. I had to bring as many as I felt were important. Here's 4 examples of just how much the Torah loves science. The first one is in Masechah Shabbos. That's in Tractate Shabbos. You'll find this on 75a, and it really is there. And it says in Masechah Shabbos on 75a, how do I know that it is a mitzvah, one of the 613 commandments, to know astronomy? And I don't mean to be able to figure out when the lunar month is going to change. Not that real basic Rosh Chodesh stuff. I'm talking knowing astronomy well. The Talmud says knowing how to calculate where eclipses are going to be and when they're going to happen, which was known back then. There was the Saros cycle in Babylon, but knowing some advanced astronomical calculations. Knowing how the stars are going to move across the sky, in what order and at what time. Knowing where the moon is going to be, what shape and what size. Advanced astronomy. How do I know, says the Talmud, that it is a mitzvah, one of the 613 commandments, to know astronomy that well? And a verse is brought in the Talmud. Ki hi chachmaschem v'naschem le'nei ha'amim. The verse is on the screen in English. The Talmud takes it as a given that it is one of the 613 commandments to know an entire field of science. And although most people who codified the 613 commandments do not list this, Rambam doesn't list it as one of the commandments, the Sefer Mitzvahs Gedolos does, the Smag. The Smag lists it, unfortunate name now that we speak English. The Smag, he codified the 6, I hope one day Yechiel Krisch doesn't mean cloud of noxious gas. You just gotta wonder what society will do with your original name. In any event, the Sefer Mitzvahs Gedolos, we'll call him that for today, he does codify this as one of the 613 commandments, which means your very holy rabbi, who I'm sure keeps all of the mitzvahs, might be missing one. Better catch up, Rabbi. Astronomy? Starting tomorrow. So the Torah has no problem at all with astronomy, and the entire area of science. It's a mitzvah to study it. How about medicine? Medicine's my area, right? A little bit of biomedicine. We had some doctors in the room. It says in Tractate Brachos on 60a that nitna ter reshus l'refer l'rapes. Doctors are given permission to heal. I would motion, a little controversially, but I can prove it, that the Torah respects medicine more than medicine respects medicine. Rabbi, if you're available for a question in the back, I have a question for the rabbi. He's busy. I'll ask it rhetorically then. I usually pick on the rabbi, but the rabbi's doing his job, so I gotta pick on somebody else. In any event, I'll ask it rhetorically. I can tell you for a fact that if a doctor comes to Rabbi Brisky and says to him that a certain congregant in the shul on Yom Kippur is too sick to fast, and if this congregant fasts, they will, God forbid, die, and it's this doctor's professional opinion that it is a life and death matter, that they must not fast on Yom Kippur, what would the rabbi say? There we go. They all ruled for you, Rabbi. You're right, he would say that. Now, Rabbi, I have a question for you. How sure are you of that decision? Is that a 100% sure decision? 90%? 80%? How sure?
It doesn't, even if it's 5% or 1%.
But you're 100%, right? You're 100% sure. That means that Rabbi Brisky takes the doctor 100% seriously, because Jewish law does when a doctor says there's a life threat on the table. Medicine does not feel that way about medicine. Ask any doctor how certain they are of anything, especially when it comes to drugs, especially when it comes to medicines. At best, you would give it a 98% confidence interval, right? Medicine understands, doctors understand that science is not perfect. Doctors understand that they could be wrong about something. Judaism does not recognize that possibility. If a doctor says someone's life is in danger, they are 100% at risk. So in a way, you could argue that the Torah respects medicine even more than medicine respects medicine in certain contexts. So the Torah has no problem with astronomy, and quite to the contrary, the Torah has no problem at all with medicine, perhaps likes medicine better than medicine likes medicine. There's a Rambam, that's Maimonides, in Yesodei HaTorah at the very beginning, 2:2, easy to find, where he says that the study of the natural world is almost essentially the only way to pray. That you cannot pray effectively if you don't study the natural world. How can you say that God is incredible because he built these giant mountains and this incredibly deep ocean? These are the verses of praise during the morning prayers. How can we claim that God is so much bigger than these things if we don't know how big they are? The more we study the natural universe, the more we understand the natural universe, the natural planet, the world, the universe, the more we study science, the better we understand just how great the Creator is who made these things. Rambam's advice on how to pray effectively is to think about the greatness of creation, really understand just how vast and how complex and how high and how low everything is in the natural world, and then to attribute all of it to God and to declare that it is all nothing relative to the infinite God. Can't do that without a study of the natural world. So the Torah also has no problem with the study of the natural world. To the contrary, it is one of the only effective ways to pray. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidus, makes the claim that people who study the natural world are better at prayer than people who study Torah all day, because they have something to compare it to when they speak in the verses of praise about the greatness of God. It's quite a claim. So once again, no problem with science and Torah. And my last one, honestly, there's 300 examples, but I wanted to give you some of my favorites, the greatest hits of Torah and science not conflicting. One time when I gave the similar talk to this, they put a title on the talk, Science versus Torah. And I don't like that necessarily. I mean, it's a great way to bring people into the room. But as far as science versus Torah goes, we don't have much of a conflict in most cases. The last one is a little bit of Zohar. We have any Kabbalists in the room? Starting now, the rest of you will be. We're about to learn a Zohar together. I believe part of the lecture series is Mysticism Kabbalah, right, Rabbi? Yes, so you're going to become Kabbalist. This is your intro to Kabbalah. This is written in the Zohar. It says in the Zohar that in the 6th century of the 6th millennium, the well springs of wisdom will open from on high, and the well springs of wisdom will open from below. These two kinds of wisdom, a higher wisdom and an earthly wisdom, will be the things that usher in the coming of the Mashiach. This date roughly corresponds to Newton's Principia and the advent of modern science, and also roughly corresponds to the advent of Hasidus with the Baal Shem Tov. The Rebbe would frequently use this Zohar to explain that the two things that will usher in the coming of Mashiach are the higher wisdom of Hasidus and the earthly wisdom of science. Science brings Mashiach. We don't usually have problems with it. We're friends. Torah and science get along, they really do. And there's one major application that has really shaken things up lately. And it is that we always had some really good ideas in the Torah. The Torah's got some great ideas. It's God's wisdom. It's got to be a good idea, right? The Torah's got some great ideas in it. But we haven't until recently had fantastic examples to drive those points home. We have theory in the Torah, and we lack examples of it in the physical world. And sometimes science ends up giving us the words to talk about a Torah concept that for years we just had to take on faith. And I'm going to give you an example. There are many, but this is my favorite. A nuclear power example. This is a real rough and real inaccurate intro to how nuclear bombs work. Please, FBI, you're not, this is not, I'm going to teach them all how to make nuclear bombs. They're going to come after me. These are the basics. I don't think you can use, if you can enrich uranium, you might need only this, but first you got to enrich uranium. Nonetheless, we know from nuclear power, nuclear energy, the study of nuclear physics, that an atom, the most basic functional unit of all matter, contains incredible energy inside it. And if you can split that atom, you can release incredible energy and a neutron. And that neutron will pop off and cause a nuclear chain reaction that will cause every subsequent atom of that type to split until you have an uncontrolled explosion, or in the case of nuclear power, hopefully a controlled explosion. And we also know that now that nuclear physics has been set up the way that it is, and all the math and the science has been done, there's, I assume, a button in Washington somewhere, big and red, I assume. I've never seen it, but I imagine a big red button. And if you know the right codes and you got the right key, anybody can press that button without knowing any nuclear physics. Nowadays, a baby could launch a nuclear war. In theory, if they could get in, right? The basic pressing of the button doesn't take a lot of sophistication. The Rebbe used this to explain concepts in Torah that didn't really have good examples before we understood nuclear power. Let me drive it home, and then we'll get into the conflicts. If the most basic functional unit of matter has that much energy in it, what is the potential of every single person in this room? How do you unlock it? By splitting yourself, by giving to another, by taking yourself a little bit less seriously, your needs a little bit less seriously, and focusing on the needs of your friend, the needs of God, the needs of the people. When you split your personal atom, you release your true potential. And it doesn't just happen for you. If one person in this room decides to release their personal potential through splitting themselves a little bit, it sets off a nuclear chain reaction, and everybody else in your neighborhood, everybody else in your community, they begin to change too, and it makes the whole world better. And lest you assume that it'll take a great rabbi or a very righteous person to start this nuclear chain reaction that brings us a better world, Nowadays, even a baby can push that button. You don't need a lot of experience in Judaism. You don't need a lot of righteousness. The physics is all there. Press the button and you'll change everybody around you. We knew these 4 ideas before nuclear physics. But now nuclear physics gave us the exact words to describe a deep Torah concept, that a single person really can change the world. That's a way that we use science. So science and Torah, not only do they not conflict, and not only does the Torah really like science in a lot of contexts, in some cases, science gives us the best words to explain a Torah concept that is thousands of years old. Even older. Maybe. Cliffhanger. Okay. They don't always get along. Science and Torah do great unless they don't. Today we're going to talk about the age of the universe, of course. And before we get into the age of the universe, I want to give you sort of a basis for how the scholars throughout the ages have analyzed the science-Torah problem. I want to give you the tools, and I want us to work on it together. There are 4 major approaches to reconciling science and Torah, and I have 3 of them on the screen here, signified through my funky icons that I took from Google Images without permission. What? Yeah, not the kind of thing you say into a microphone while being recorded, right? I already gave you the recipe for how to make a nuclear bomb. This is nothing compared to what I did earlier. What can you do? I have over there a twisty Havdalah candle. That twisty Havdalah candle is my symbol for twisting the Torah. That is, the Torah is not always literal. We know the Torah is not always literal. In the Torah it says, an eye for an eye. If one person pokes out someone's eye, the Torah says, you poke out their eye back. Get them where they got you. We've never understood that literally from Sinai to the present. It means the monetary value of an eye for an eye. Sometimes the Torah is non-literal. Sometimes the Torah is subject to being twisted, to being understood differently. One approach to science Torah problems is that we say the Torah is non-literal, you're taking the Torah far too seriously, and the science should win the day. That's one approach. I'm not an enormous fan of this approach under most circumstances. First of all, because if we don't have a tradition from Sinai about how to read the Torah, we're not supposed to make up new ones. I know a rabbi in New Jersey who often says that if your rabbi does not plagiarize, he's a heretic. The idea being that if rabbis come up with new ideas in this generation, a new religion is not usually something that we encourage. So twisting Torah is not fantastic, but it's there, it's on the books, it's something that is sometimes done. Let's keep that one to the side. Throughout the presentation, you will sometimes see that icon in the corner. That's a twist Torah moment. Another approach is that we can twist the science. Right? Who says the science is right? Science is fundamentally not done yet. Science is a work in progress. Science changes a ton all the time, especially when it comes to biomedicine, right? We change what we're talking about all the time. We get better. It's improving. I don't think there's anything nefarious going on here, but science isn't perfect. How about we twist the science? See, the science is no good. I have some friends back in the Muncie area where I live who do believe firmly that science is done by like 2 people plotting in a basement somewhere. So one approach out there is, why don't you just throw away the science, twist the science, make it whatever you want. Science says the universe is very old, the Torah says something else, so science really means that the Torah is right. I don't love this approach either, although sometimes it's applicable. Science isn't perfect, but it's not a great one. And one of the main reasons it's not a great one is because of all this stuff. The Torah takes science very seriously. I'm a Jew, therefore I take science very seriously. I take my cues from the Torah. The Torah is the will and wisdom of God himself. The will and wisdom of God himself takes science seriously enough that we don't twist it unless we must. So I don't love the approach of twisting science either. I have that signified by a real messed up bunch of DNA. I can't imagine what mutation this makes. But this is my jumble of DNA. We twisted the science. The third approach you find in the books is what I call the Kabbalah blast. You have a problem between science and Torah? I have a solution. Kabbalah makes it go away. Boom! There is no world, there is no science, there is no Torah. Everything's understood in a metaphor at a higher level, and if you know enough mysticism and you squint just right, there are no problems. You can probably tell I'm not an enormous fan of this approach either. Not because it doesn't have merit. There are cases where it makes a lot of sense to use Kabbalah to understand the Torah. But there are no cases, 0, where it makes sense to rely on Kabbalah to understand the Torah. There's no passage of Torah that is not possible to understand without Kabbalah. Kabbalah augments the Torah. It gives us a deeper understanding of the Torah. But the Torah has a simple reading that must work. If Kabbalah is your only answer, you don't have an answer. Kabbalah is meant to add layers and depth, not to answer the most basic questions. So Kabbalah misapplied can be a problem. Kabbalah applied properly, fantastic. I don't love these three approaches, although we'll look at them. The fourth approach is my favorite. I call it synthesis, and is here signified by an elephant. My synthesis elephant. The fourth approach, synthesis, makes the claim, this is one you find a lot in the Rebbe's writings, and this is the one that I speak about most often, for perhaps obvious reasons. And that is that if science is understood the way science is meant to be understood, and Torah is understood the way it's meant to be understood, you don't actually have conflicts between the two. That is, that whenever there's a science-Torah problem, someone crossed a line somewhere. Science made a claim that science cannot make, or Torah made a claim that Torah cannot make. And when the two stay in their lanes, so to speak, and everything does its job, the conflicts tend to go away and everybody wins. This requires understanding what Torah and science are meant to do. Torah is God saying this is the truth. There's no collection of evidence. There's no best available evidence. There's no data. There's no trying to convince you. The fact is, God tells you that this is what I did, this is how I made the world, this is what the world is like, and that's just the Torah saying, hey, this is what it is. Mitzias, as we would say in Hebrew. That is Torah's truth. Science is the collection of evidence. And it's fantastic in that regard. It is, as I told some of the people who were here earlier, the best tool. Modern Western science is without a doubt the best tool humanity has ever had for figuring out the truth of something that is currently unknown. Science collects evidence again and again until it starts to work and get the right answer. It almost never does on the first try. The reason why I have the elephant here is because of a parable that comes, I believe, from the Indian subcontinent. It's not a Jewish one, and I don't like using non-Jewish sources in my presentations, but it does say in the Talmud, Chachma b'goyim tamin, Torah b'goyim al tamin. If they tell you that the nations of the world have wisdom, believe them. They're very wise. If they tell you that they have morality, Torah, the mandate of God to know right from wrong, they are not right about that. The nations of the world do not have religion. They do not have morality. They do not have God. We are the ones who teach the world what God wants. However, wisdom, they have in spades. So, this is wisdom from the rest of the world, and I'll bring it today. Excuse me for a minute. And once again, we'll bring our rabbi into the discussion, our dear rabbi. Let's say that we all are, you won't have to answer, I'm just going to use you. Let's say that we decide to play a little trick on our dear rabbi. Just between us, you know, us friends. Send the rabbi out of the room, and I bring into the room an elephant. And I blindfold the rabbi, I put a notebook in his hand, and I tell the rabbi, you are allowed to circle this creature however many times you want, collecting data. Circle it, touch it, feel it, ask me questions about it, use science, evidence, collect evidence, and at the end of the day, tell us what creature is in front of us. Now, we know it's an elephant. He doesn't know anything. So Rabbi Brisky begins walking around the elephant, and he observes that it's got a leathery hide. He observes hard tusks. He asks us the color, and we generously reveal that it is grayish, and he begins to collect his data. 3-4 times around the elephant, he brings us his conclusions, and he says, I have done the science. That's really how science works. It's a collection of evidence, right? He collects evidence. His hypothesis is, it's a walrus. Why not? Tusks, leathery hide, gray. Now, is he right? Well, I don't know if he's wrong. See, here's the thing. Scientifically, he didn't do anything wrong. He's just not done yet. In fact, he's wrong. We know that it's an elephant, so the science here was unnecessary. However, I do believe that if we give Rabbi Brisky enough times around the elephant, he's going to rule out walrus, and eventually he's going to arrive at elephant. That's what happens when scientists keep on repeating their work. Iteration is science's best friend. So when science does what it's supposed to do, the collection of evidence, it tends to get to the truth. But it's important to note that science is not done yet and might need a few more times around the elephant, whereas Torah is the truth of the matter. We're in the room, we know it's an elephant, God's in the room, he knows what he did. So the Torah is the truth, and science arrives at the truth through the collection of evidence, hopefully. There's no guarantees, though. There's no guarantee that science will ever arrive at the truth. The same way there's no guarantee that, let me give you an example. This is one that we use when we're teaching just how science works to undergrad students. If I have a die, you know, a die, and I roll it, and you roll die, right? You roll a die, and it comes out on a 3. How convinced are you that the die is rigged? Not remotely, right? 1 in 6 chance. Let's say I roll that die 100 times. How convinced are we that it's rigged? We're becoming more convinced, right? Every time I roll that die and it comes up 3, I become a little more convinced that this die is rigged. Let's say I do it 10,000 times, it's always 3. At some point you say, pretty sure it's rigged. Are we ever certain it's rigged? No. you can't be certain it's rigged. There's a 1 in 6 chance every time you spin it, every time you roll the die, that it'll come up as a 3. Now, the odds of it coming up as 3 that many times are exponentially small, but you cannot, through the collection of evidence, rule out any possibilities. This is why there's no such thing as scientific proof. There's mathematical proof. Science doesn't prove things. Science brings you the best available evidence, iterated again and again and again, and some of the science we have today is the equivalent of rolling a die 10,000 times and getting a 3. That's the best science. Some of it's quite new. We've rolled it once and we've gotten a 3. It's important to know that science is a collection of evidence that gets better, and Torah is done. It's true, it's over. Okay. With this in mind, these 4 approaches, let's apply them. Let's do the age of the universe. How do we know, according to Torah, that the universe is 5,785 years old? That is our opinion. It's what the Torah tells us. God says he made the world in 6 days, 6 24-hour periods, and he rested on the 7th day, another 24-hour period. Since then, 5,785 years have passed. We know because we can count. The math here is real easy. We know how long Adam lived. We know when he died. We know when the biblical flood was. We know when we left Egypt. We know when the Beis HaMikdash, when the temple went up and when the temple went down. And we count all the way to the present. We have a written record of a lot of this. We're very old people, and we've been writing and reading for a very long time. We are anciently literate. And we've counted 5,785 years. So that's where the Torah gets its number from. 6 days, because in Genesis it says that God made the world in 6 days. The word used there is yom, which is a day. Since then, 5,785 years have passed. That's where we get the Torah's side of things from. And I'm phrasing this rhetorically, so allow me to clarify. That's where the infinite will and wisdom of God comes from. We know that because the Torah says, and we can count. How does science come to its numbers? Now, this is not a small difference between friends. The science, it's a big difference. The Torah has 5,785 years. Science has a lot more. The rock that we're on right now, about 4.5 billion years old. That's a lot of millions, and that's a lot more than 5,785. We cannot just split the difference between friends. I wish we could. But halfway between would make science pretty happy, but not necessarily us. As for the universe, even older. This number changes a ton. But right now, or at least as of a couple months ago, the going rate for age of the universe was 13.7 billion. I've heard recently it's been updated to 13.8. A couple years ago it was 14. At some point it was 12. I gotta tell you the truth. The age of the Earth is quite static as far as science is concerned. We use radiometric dating to figure out how old the deepest layers of rock are, and our estimates keep on coming up 4.5 billion. That happens a lot. I'd be very, very surprised to see that number change in the immediate future. However, this number down here, that 13.7, that is a wiggly piece of number. That number in my lifetime has changed like 7 or 8 times, and I know a number of physicists who work in this particular field who have told me that they would not be remotely surprised to wake up tomorrow, any morning, and find this number is 100 billion. This is I've done a little bit with you on confidence intervals. I'm not going to teach statistics tonight, but to give you an idea, the confidence interval is about plus minus 500 million for both of these. The confidence interval on 4.5 billion years is 95%, about as good as medicine. The confidence interval on 13.7 billion is 65%. A number that a statistician goes, ooh, not even I can fix that. Right? Do we have any data people in the room, statisticians? Well, if you know any, you know they can fix anything, but not the 65% confidence interval. This number's wiggly. But the fact is, much older than 5,785, right? That's the point I'm trying to show. This second number comes from cosmic microwave background radiation, which is a mouthful, and it's the first time I think I've ever lectured and said the word right on the first try. Cosmic microwave background radiation. It's essentially fossilized light from the Big Bang. That is, since the Big Bang, there's been light traveling toward us. We can look at that light through telescopes, see how it stretches throughout time, and do a calculation. The math is a little complicated, but we can do a calculation about how long that light has been traveling for, and by using the evidence and how much that light has stretched, and by using the evidence from the fossilized light from the moment of the Big Bang, we posit the age of the universe. But frankly, that way, I'm telling you, the fact that it changed from 14 billion to 13.7 billion, I cannot stress enough that that was a loss of, 300 million years? If I made that kind of mistake at work, I'd be in big trouble. I'm not allowed. In biomedicine, you're not allowed to be off by 300 million. In physics, they let you do anything. So, look, biologists talking here. But physics is a lot more forgiving than biology because, honestly, you're a lot more forgiving about the age of the universe than you are about that pill that your doctor just prescribed, right? Right. So, I understand, but at the same time, they're wiggly, less wiggly. Very wiggly, less wiggly. Okay. Let's apply our approaches. First of all, we can twist the Torah. I got the icon in the corner. There's my twisty Havdalah candle. Approach number 1, let's try twisting the Torah. Maybe the Torah doesn't mean 24-hour periods. Maybe the Torah doesn't mean a literal 5,785 years. We should at least explore the possibility, right? Absolutely, we should explore it. First of all, we have a line in Psalms, in Tehillim, that say that 1,000 years in your eyes is like, or a day for you is like 1,000, whatever. It's complicated, but the paraphrasing goes like this. 1 day equals 1,000 years relative to God, okay? Fine. It's on the screen in English, whatever. I always get that one backwards. Ki alef shanim b'yom esmal, right? Ki yom esmal, whatever. 1,000 years equals a day. Okay, so let's say that the 6 days of creation each lasted 1,000 years. We have Tehillim, we have Psalms that allows us to do that, right? It's not new, the Psalms say it. Okay, great. Now our world is about 12,000 years old. Are we any closer to 13.7 billion? We aren't any closer. Try putting that into a calculator. You'll come up with no closer. It's not any closer. You've accomplished nothing. So if you would like this, if this makes you feel better, you can have it. I have no problem with making the universe, according to Torah, 12,000 years old. That's not really a twist of the Torah at all. We have Psalms to rely on, but you've helped nobody. The Torah's mad at you because now your days are non-literal, and science is mad at you because you're nowhere near the middle, right? So you can do it if you want, but it won't help you. If it makes you happy, go for it. However, there are some things that we can do with that basic idea. Before I jump to this in the middle over here, I want to jump down here. I'm going to go out of order on my own slide just because of presentation. A theory that has been peddled for a while now, that I haven't been able to attribute to one particular source, is something that I call epoch theory. And the epoch theory is that each day in the Torah is not meant to be a literal day, it's meant to be a period of time. Day is just a placeholder word for a period of time in history. And because I'm in an excellent mood this evening, partially because of the coffee, I think, but also because you guys are just fantastic. I'm in a really good mood, and because I'm in a really good mood, let's let the word day, the word yom in Genesis, let's let it mean anything we want. How much would we like to get us to 13.7 billion? I think we'd like about 2 billion per day, give or take, right? Roughly 2.5 billion per day would be perfect. So if we use epoch theory, we can say that when God says day, he means 2 billion years, which is a stretch because he said day. But let's allow it for the moment. I told you I was in a good mood. Day equals 2 billion years. Let's see if it lines up. It doesn't. I made a graph. I made a graph for you. And this graph shows the current estimates, according to the best available evidence, modern science, for how long each day should have taken. For example, day 1 of creation, God makes the heavens and the earth. That would be the Big Bang. I do need to pause here just to tell you how awesome the Big Bang is. First of all, it's called the Big Bang. It can't be like underwhelming. But at the same time, the thing that's so awesome about the Big Bang is, and really awesome about the Big Bang, is that prior to this theory, which I think came out in like the 1950s. So if you were to ask a scientist in 1930, 1940, they would tell you that the universe always existed and does not have a moment of creation. That was the dominant scientific theory, that there was no beginning of the universe. Meanwhile, Torah had been saying repeatedly, God had been telling us for years, no, I started this thing, I definitely made it, I remember, and when I made it, I started with light. I looked into this a little bit. I can't be sure, I can't rule out every religion lahavdil ever to exist, but as far as I know, no major religion in world history, prior to ours, the truth of God, ever claimed that the first thing that was made was light. But we, for thousands of years, were telling the world, God told us he made the world, it has a beginning, and it began with light. Around 1950, whenever the Big Bang Theory comes out, suddenly science has done enough work that it catches up to Torah and finds, no, there is a beginning of the universe, and you know what happened first? Light. Fantastic. Fantastic. Proof that if you circle the elephant enough times, you arrive at the truth. Science circled the elephant until it found the Big Bang. Now, I'm not sure the Big Bang's right. It could update again. But right now, science does line up with Torah on this front, and that's kind of cool, I think. So anyway, you have a Big Bang. That's day 1. By day 2, you already have a planet Earth. That means we need to get from 13.7 billion years to 4.5 billion years ago in 1 day. So day 1 of creation will be 9 billion years. That is the first time God says Yom, he means 9 billion. Okay. What does he mean when he says Yom the second time? Well, we're getting from Earth to trees, so 2 billion. Yom just changed a lot, but you know when it gets really fun? Day 5. From birds and fish to mammals, an evolutionary biologist will tell you, we're talking hundreds of millions of years. So now the word day means nothing in Genesis. It means nothing at all. It was one thing to take day and turn it into a non-literal 1,000, because Psalms does it. It's another thing to take day, turn it into a non-literal 1,000, and make it 2 billion. That you laughed at, it was so funny, but we allowed it for now. Now the word day in one verse means 9 billion, and a few verses later means 100 million. Does anybody buy that? I don't think so. It's not a realistic reading of the Torah. The Torah definitely doesn't think this. The epoch theory is, as far as I'm concerned, worthless. The other one I'm going to show you, though, is not worthless. I just got some notes on it. The epoch theory all by itself, that the days are fuzzy, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I believe Dr. Schroeder has been here before. I think the rabbi told me that. Dr. Schroeder's theory is fascinating. I have it on the screen. And he spends most of his lectures, as far as I know, explaining the physics, which is not something that I'm going to spend a ton of time doing today. But to make a long story short, Dr. Schroeder's theory is that we are viewing the world from where we stand right now. And from the world's perspective, 14 billion years roughly have passed. 13.7 billion years have passed if you're standing here looking at the fossilized light from the Big Bang. However, if you are standing at the point of the Big Bang and watching the light extend toward Earth, you would be off by a factor of 900 billion. He then does the math and takes 14 billion divided by 900 billion, which sounds hard until you remember that you can cross off all those zeros. Remember like 3rd grade? Right, so it's actually quite easy. And you end up with 5.5 days, the amount of days up until Adam, which means that you could make the claim, this is the one that Dr. Schroeder makes, roughly, I'm vastly paraphrasing the gentleman, but his claim, more or less, is that the original Big Bang, from its perspective, from God's perspective, making the world, 5 days have passed. And from the perspective of those of us on Earth, is that mine or yours or something? No, it's not mine. Okay. Unless it is. Okay. From the perspective of the Big Bang, from God, 5.5 days have passed. From the perspective of Earth, you would have 14 billion years passing. And that explains why this Earth is 14 billion years old. But also, from the perspective of the Big Bang, 5.5 days is how long it takes for creation. 5,785 days have passed. This is an appealing approach to a lot of people. You've heard this one before. People like it? Yeah? Whenever I give this lecture, people always ask me if I'm aware of this opinion. I got some problems with it, all with all due respect to the gentleman. Dr. Schroeder is brilliant and a good Jew. But I have some issues, I have some notes. And my first note is that this assumes that the Torah is written from the perspective of the Big Bang, from the perspective of God. And that doesn't really square with the fact that the Torah is supposed to be read by me. So I'm not sure about the idea that the Torah's perspective should be God's perspective rather than my perspective. He's writing it for an audience, yes? God doesn't write about cows from his perspective. They're like celestial bits of dust, yeah? So I have a problem with reading the Torah from that direction. But my bigger problem is that there's an assumption here that everybody who has read Genesis prior to the advent of modern physics was wrong. That doesn't square with our tradition. Our tradition is not that science comes in and explains the Torah to us for the first time. Our tradition is, our holy tradition going back thousands of years, is that science comes in and helps us understand deeper levels of the Torah. Not that everybody was wrong until 30 years ago, until 50 years ago. This perspective assumes that everybody was incorrect about the fundamental, what the word day means, that the word day was being read incorrectly until the advent of modern physics. That is a problem. That's a kind of a twist of the Torah. That's why I put it on the twist Torah slide. That is not the simple reading of the Torah by any means. The idea that without modern physics I can't understand Torah would imply that anybody in this room who does not understand physics does not understand Genesis. It would imply that without theoretical physics as a background, you can't read Torah and arrive at the truth. That doesn't square. So while it is a fascinating adjunct addition to what Torah has to offer, the fact that modern physics doesn't necessarily contradict the Torah is fascinating. As an answer for the simple reading in Genesis, I think it leaves a lot to be desired. And I think it does twist the simple reading of the Torah, which is that God made the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. So that's my twist Torah slide. I think these approaches, a lot of them have merit, but none of them really put the icing on the cake. None of them really solve our problem completely, at least in my opinion. The biggest issue with all of these, though, is the 10 Commandments. You guys remember the 10 Commandments, right? Believe it or not, most people don't. If you ask anybody to name the 10 Commandments by heart, most people can't do it. I'll get lost somewhere in the middle. I count on my fingers, I have 9, I have to go back. Anyway, one of the 10 Commandments is to keep Shabbos. And I have it on the screen in English, and also a funny cartoon about it ruining your weekend plans. When God gives the commandment for us to keep Shabbos, he says, I want you to copy me exactly. Do exactly what I did from my perspective. I worked for 6 days, Yom, and rested on the 7th day, Yom. You copy me. You work for 6 days, Yom, and rest on the 7th day, Yom. God says in Exodus, copy me exactly. Now, if these days are non-literal, or we're supposed to understand God's days as being billions of years, or our days being billions relative to his, I've got bad news for you. Your cholent is going to get very, very cold. You're going to have Shabbos once every couple billion years. If there was any doubt whatsoever that the Torah means literal days, this kills that doubt. The doubt's gone. When God says, copy me exactly, what I did is exactly what you do every single weekday, when he says that, he gets rid of the possibility of twisting the Torah. Now we know for sure that God means 6 24-hour periods. Otherwise, my Shabbos is coming, in a while. So we can't twist the Torah. We would if we could. We tried, but we can't. And since we can't, we go on to our next attempt. How about we twist the science, right? We couldn't twist the Torah. Let's throw science under the bus. I told you we don't like doing it, but let's try just for fun. There's science and there's science. Any scientist will tell you this. By the way, that means nothing. Thank you. There's science and there's science. But any scientist will tell you this. There is prospective research, double-blind trials, randomized controlled studies, the gold standard of science. When science is done in this fashion, it is seldom incorrect, although sometimes we don't get it perfectly right. It's good. It's good science. Science is not necessarily meant to work in retrospect. It doesn't work as well that way. Retrospective trials are just not as good. It doesn't mean that they're not ever right. It means they have more room for error. The science that we use in biomedicine is almost always prospective. The science that is used in dating the universe and in dating the earth is always retrospective. Based on a sample we've been looking at for 50 to 100 years, we posit what it was doing for the past several billion years. That's not necessarily wrong, but it certainly isn't the gold standard of science. It could be incorrect. You can tell I'm not comfortable with that being incorrect. I'm really not. I mean, the radiocarbon dating is a good method, but it's possible. Every scientist understands that retrospective science could be incorrect and is much more likely to be incorrect than prospective science. The example that I like to give, I put an ice cube on the screen, is one of an antecedent and a consequent. This is a bad example, but it works for the lecture. And the bad example is this. Let's say that I have an ice cube on my desk right here. Desk, lectern, I have a stender. I have an ice cube right here. Who here is willing to hypothesize, based on the best available evidence, that in 2 hours it will be a puddle of water? I am. The room's hot. It was cold before, but now it heated up. You were right. Maybe it's just me. It's a good hypothesis that this ice will turn into a puddle. For sure? Will it happen for sure? No. Not for sure, but fairly. I mean, if somebody could, I could eat it. I mean, there's things that could happen, but odds are this ice cube's going toward a puddle. Fair guess. Let's say that I come in here and I find a puddle on the table. How convinced am I that it was once an ice cube? First of all, not at all. I can do science to try to figure out if it was once an ice cube. I can try the temperature. I can try to figure out the circumstances. Was the room cold? I can try to back calculate it, but at the end of the day, I'm on much shakier ground when I go to the present to the past than I am when I go from the present to the future. That's just the way science is built. Science, as I told you earlier, is the best method we have. Current Western modern science is the best method we have of observing the natural world, but it works best when it goes the way that it's meant to go. Modern science is meant to go prospectively, and it becomes weaker when it goes retrospectively. So, could we twist the science to say that, look, age of the universe, age of the earth, these are retrospective, and retrospect is suspect, so says the author of the slide. Could I twist the science? I don't know. I guess you could, if you want to. I don't like it. I don't like it because the Torah doesn't usually do it. The Torah does. I told you, God doesn't like it when I twist science. I'll only do it if I have to, and I don't think I have to. Also, the radiometric dating data is really good. It's retrospective, but it's taken from samples all around the world to try to weed out some of these problems. The age of the universe data is not very good, whatever. But the age of the Earth data is quite good. So I'm not a fan of twisting science. It's not my favorite approach, but I wanted to give it to you because it's on the books. This one is available, and if you want it, you can take it. Just like if you want, you can take the age of the universe where we twist the Torah. All of them are available. I will note, just as long as I'm back at this slide, that Dr. Schroeder's estimate that takes, I did it backwards here, but in any event, you take 14 billion, you divide it by 900 billion, you end up with 5.5 days, so that would posit a 14 or 15 billion year old universe. First of all, his number that he comes to is 15 billion. That is not 13.7 billion. It's off by $1 billion. So first of all, that's not perfect. Second of all, being off by $1 billion's a lot. It doesn't look like a lot on paper, but it's off by a lot. And second of all, as I told you before, nobody in physics is confident we're going to keep this number. So saying that the Torah really means the universe is 15 billion years old feels real good right now in a 13.7 billion year old world universe, but it's not going to feel real good when that number gets updated to 50 billion in a couple of years. So it's not an ideal approach. In any event, Kabbalah blast. Remember this guy? Let's do Kabbalah. Let's try to solve it with Kabbalah. So I didn't love twisting the Torah, although I showed you, I think, some realistic possibilities. I didn't love twisting the science, although I showed you some realistic possibilities. Why don't we try the Kabbalah blast? See if we can use Kabbalah to get rid of this problem. Anybody here familiar with Rav Aryeh Kaplan's approach? This is Rav Aryeh Kaplan's approach in a nutshell. He's a bit of a Kabbalist. He translated a lot of fascinating works of Kabbalah. This is Rav Aryeh Kaplan's approach, more or less. He quotes the Sefer Temuna. The Sefer Temuna is a Kabbalistic work, very, very old. I believe it's attributed to Nechunya ben Akana, so it's attributed to one of the Mishnah authors, very old Kabbalah book. And this book, Sefer Temuna, says that God made and destroyed worlds. It's also brought in Midrashim. This is a big idea in Judaism, especially in mystical Judaism, that we are not on this rock for the first time, or we are. But this rock is not as old as we are. God made a world, had a whole, I don't know, life and biodiversity, and he destroyed it after 7,000 years. And then he rebuilt it. Gave it 1,000 years and destroyed it. And rebuilt it, gave it 1,000 years and destroyed it. And he's done this many times. And the Genesis begins with this particular cycle, but that the rock is super old. The rock has seen, the rock of this earth and the light of the universe has seen several worlds be made and destroyed. This is a big idea in Kabbalah. Now, you might have noticed that since each of these days, according to Kabbalah, each of these cycles is supposed to last 7,000 years. At best, 6 of them have gone by already, right? We would be on the 7th. We can't be on the 8th. That doesn't exist. 7 cycles of 7,000 years. So if you put us at the 6th of the 7,000-year cycles, you get 42,000 years. The rock that we're on should be 42,000 years old. Does that help us scientifically? Not even a little bit. 42,000 is not 4.5 billion or 13.7 billion. However, it's a bigger number. 42,000, right. It's, by definition, 42,000 is not 13.7 billion. I taught you something. I understand that was a silly thing to say, but it's not. However, Yitzchak of Akko, Rav Yitzchak of Akko, was a student of the Ramban, a medieval scholar, and a Kabbalist himself. One of the people who helped verify the authenticity of the Zohar. He has a theory, I don't know, he writes it, that each of these days that we're dealing with could be God days. Remember, our God days are 1,000 years? Oh, now we have a factor. So if I take that, I have the math on the screen. If I take 6 times 7,000, I get 46,000. If I add in 365,000, that is the factor that allows me to take those days and turn them into 1,000 years per day, I get about 15 billion. Not bad. So that would mean that according to Kabbalah, the rock that we're on right now could be 15 billion years old. First of all, science does not like this idea at all. Because the Earth cannot be 15 billion years old. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. The universe is supposed to be 15 billion. That would require Earth to be relatively new. It doesn't square. There's a bigger problem with it, and that comes when you actually read the Sefer Temuna. I opened the Sefer Temuna, and then I look back at Rav Aryeh Kaplan's book, and he seems to have sort of glossed over this point. But he does mention it, at least in one of his footnotes. The Sefer Temuna does not think we're on the 6th cycle. He says we're on the 2nd one, which means that you're off by an enormous factor here. So you have to assume we're on a 6th cycle, even though nobody says that. The Sefer Temuna says the 2nd cycle. So it's off. It's off by a billion years. The Sefer Temuna himself uses a different factor. And finally, really most importantly, there is a bottom line in Kabbalah. There really is. Kabbalah is not just up in the air for anybody to grab anymore. The same way that there is a code of Jewish law that gives us the final opinion on Jewish law, and you're not allowed to just go according to some medieval commentary anymore. You're stuck with the Shulchan Aruch. There is a final codifier and decizer of Kabbalah, and his name is the Arizal, Rav Yitzchak Luria. He is the final word. Once he said something about Kabbalah, all of the prior ones should be understood according to him. This is universally accepted. The Arizal is the final word, as is the Ramak, Rav Moshe Cordovero. The two of them are the final words in Kabbalah. Both of them, the Ramak and the Arizal, say that this is not correct in Gashmias, in the physical world. There was only one physical world created 5,785 years ago. All of these prior worlds were spiritual worlds. The rock that we're on is only a couple thousand years old. That's the final decision according to Kabbalah. So you can't even use the Sefer Temuna anymore. Because the Arizal already said he meant it non-literally, and the Arizal is the final Kabbalistic word on Kabbalah. So once again, we failed. Kabbalah Blast fails us. Whereas I think there's a lot of merit to the twist Torah and twist science approaches when applied correctly, I don't think there's any merit at all to the Kabbalah Blast approach in this case. Because basic books of Kabbalah show that this method does not work. It only works if you don't know the Kabbalistic books that well. On the list of things you don't say when they're recording you. Okay? Let's try synthesis. I want to motion the following. I'm not sure I'm right, but I want to motion it anyway. Let's assume that the current available scientific evidence is completely correct, which I already told you is an assumption. It could change, but it's pretty good. So why don't we assume it's correct? I believe, based on the best available evidence right now, that if you have a Big Bang, if God makes a Big Bang, and he leaves the natural world to carry out its natural processes, it will take 13.7 billion years to arrive in here for this lecture tonight. That's how long it takes. I think the science is right about that. I'm not sure it is. It could change. The number could update. But I'm willing to trust the science on this. Even though I don't officially trust science, I look at science, I'll allow it. I think it might be right. That's how long it takes to get from the Big Bang to here. What is science's job? To tell me how nature should work according to the best available evidence. The Torah trusts it, I trust it too. Science is telling me that from Big Bang to now, according to natural processes, you can end up getting Earth, biodiversity, life on Earth in 13.7 billion years and not a lot sooner. Okay. The Torah says that's not how God did it. He made a miracle. How about that? Well, if that's the case, that God miraculously made the world in 6 days, even though nature would have taken 13.7 billion years, that would mean the science is completely correct. There's nothing wrong in the science. The science is not the study of miracles or how God intervenes and breaks nature. Science is the study of how the natural world should work. And God sometimes makes miracles and breaks the natural world. And that doesn't break science. The same way that water chemistry was not destroyed forever by the splitting of the sea, geochemistry is not destroyed at all by the understanding that God made the world miraculously. And by the way, this is the simplest reading of the Torah. Without any commentary, no commentary, I can tell you for sure that God made the world fast. Want some proof? Here's some proof. You guys remember Adam and Eve, yeah, remember them? They ate a fruit, got in trouble. I hope I'm not giving any spoilers. You've heard this one before. So Adam and Eve, they ate some fruit, got in big trouble. According to the basic understanding of the Torah, that each day is a 24-hour period, how old are Adam and Eve when they eat this fruit? Less, a couple hours. They're a couple hours old. So little babies without teeth are a couple hours old, and they're eating a piece of fruit? Oh, it gets worse. How old are the trees? 3 days, right? They're made on day 3. So the tree, have you ever seen a 3-day-old tree bear fruit? The simple reading of the Torah wants me to understand that a tree that is 3 days old is producing a fruit that is eaten by a 2-hour-old baby. The simplest reading of the Torah is that God made trees grow up fast, made fruit grow fast, and made people grow fast. Why not the physical universe? God put the whole thing on fast forward. That's the simplest reading of the Torah. There's no real way to read the Torah without a fast forward button. So God makes a miracle. He fast forwards creation. God is really good at, God's incredibly efficient. That's a weird thing to say, but God's incredibly efficient. What would have taken nature the way he built it 13.7 billion years, he did in 6 days. And then from that point onward, he let nature run its normal course, of course with his intervention constantly and his divine hand, but no more miracles in the speed of things. What's so cool about that is that we've twisted nobody. The Torah has not been twisted even a little bit. That's the simplest reading of the Torah. And the science has not been twisted either. Science doesn't pretend to claim what God did one time as a miracle. Science tells us what should have happened had God not intervened and made a miracle. No problem with science, no problem with Torah. Synthesis. The Rebbe's approach, by the way. I like synthesis, as you can tell. I'm very partial to this approach. Because if God hit fast forward on the world, then when we look back at the evidence of the world in front of us, we will, according to the best available evidence, find an old world, even though God made it in 6 days. The same way that if you take a movie that's an hour long and fast forward it so you experience it in 5 minutes, the movie is still an hour long, the evidence of the real that is left behind should be that many years. Science is studying what the regular progression of time should be. And Torah is telling us God hit fast forward. I don't know why this isn't a more prominent approach, because it's the only one I've ever seen that requires no twist of anything. The science is right and the Torah is right. Everybody wins. I assume I've been talking for a long time. I feel like I probably have. Rabbi Brisky, you tired of me?
No, keep going.
I'm going to keep going. I like to cap off this particular lecture about Age of the Universe by using the exact same method, or a similar method, the method of synthesis, to tackle 2 big ideas that also appear to be conflicts between science and Torah. So you're getting a bonus. Let's also do evolution, let's also do dinosaurs, as long as we're here together. Evolution and dinosaurs. Evolution is pretty easy to answer using this particular method. By the way, Lahavdil, the Christians and other non-Jewish nations, they have a big problem with evolution. They believe that evolution couldn't work at all. We do not have that problem. This may come as a surprise, and unfortunately it comes as a surprise to many Jews. We are not Christians. You're laughing now, but many Jews use Christian theology, Lahavdil, as shorthand for Jewish belief, and it is not. We disagree with them on just about everything, as a matter of fact. We're incredibly nuanced. And I'm sure that throughout the lecture series you'll see some of that play out, especially when you get to things like medical ethics. Our perspective is nuanced because the truth is nuanced. Because God's nuanced. He's big. He's everything. So no, we don't have a problem with evolution. We really don't. We are fine with evolution. We have two small notes on evolution. Note number one, evolution has to happen in 5,785 years. That's all we got. I understand that doesn't necessarily work. Evolutionary biologists will tell you that it takes hundreds of millions of years to evolve species. At the same time, as we've already explained, God can hit fast forward and evolve things faster. Right? He's God. And nonetheless, science would look back at this and say, had we left basic species alone on Earth, it would have taken them millions of years to evolve into the present biodiversity. That's not what God did. He hit fast forward. The science is right and the Torah is right. That is, the science is telling us how evolution would happen, and I believe that if you were to take the primordial soup and this rock and stick it here and wait a couple billion years, you would get something like humans. Maybe not exactly like us, you need a soul from God, but something a lot like us. But God didn't do that, He did it faster. Okay, so the time isn't such an issue, as we've already explained, but evolution itself, we have no problem with Hashem, with God making species by taking basic species and evolving them. Our only issue with that is we have a couple hard stops that are all throughout the Torah. Those hard stops are that God made mineral, vegetable, animal, and human as distinct creations ex nihilo, yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing. We do not believe that humans evolved from animals. We do not believe that animals evolved from plants. By the way, evolutionary biology doesn't either. They believe there was a common ancestor. By the way, evolutionary biology also doesn't believe that humans evolved from apes. There was a common ancestor. But in any event, we don't believe that these things evolved all in sequence. God made minerals, and rock doesn't really evolve, so whatever. God made vegetable, a basic plant, and then that plant could have evolved into all the biodiversity you have in plants. We're fine with that. God made an animal, and that animal could have evolved into the entire biodiversity of animals. We are also okay with that. And then God made humans, and you get what you have today. We have no problem with this as long as it happens in 5,785 years, which I've already explained is highly plausible using the fast-forward theory, the synthesis. So really, we don't have much of a problem here. I summarized it on the screen. And that is that science would tell you that it takes life billions of years to spontaneously emerge from primordial soup. That's what they call it, believe it or not. We literally call it primordial soup. My mother makes a chicken soup that I call that. Oh my gosh. This isn't live, right? It's okay, there's a time difference. She's asleep. It takes species millions of years to evolve. All life on Earth shares a common ancestor according to evolutionary biology, based on genetic analysis and based on the evidence of transition fossils. We say, says Torah, sure. But minerals, vegetables, animals, and humans were created yesh ma'ayin. God spent 6 days creating biodiversity, perhaps through those methods. And species have had only 5,785 years to evolve since the 6 days of creation. But during the 6 days of creation, things were on fast forward. Sure, why not? Let the animals evolve. As far as transition fossils, as long as we're here just for fun, there is a Kabbalistic source that is brought in the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Lubavitch. That's where I found it. But it's all over Kabbalah, that God made transition species and that their fossils represent something that we already knew about. That is, that God made a transition species between mineral and vegetable, one between vegetable and animal, one between animal and human. Between mineral and vegetable, coral reefs. Kind of rocky, kind of planty. That's the technical scientific term. I have real degrees from actual institutions. But only masters. You know, people always want to know if I have a PhD because they want to call me Dr. Krisch. I tell them I have a master's degree so you can call me Master Krisch, and no one does it. Next flyer, right? Next flyer, yeah? Isn't it funny how some degrees don't get you the title? Bachelor is not one you want. Bachelor Krisch. Thank God, happily married. In any event, actually, the Kabbalah says that between animals and humans, God made a transition species, and guess what that is, according to Kabbalah? Apes. Kind of cool, huh? So when you look back at the evidence and see that there are things that look like they're transitioning from one species to another, or common genetic code between them, sure, that might be how God did it. No problem with the science. It's just not the speed he did it at. And of course, the basic exception that humans are made special. Which, by the way, evolutionary biologists, they don't get too mad when you say this, believe it or not. The idea that you're entirely right about your science with the exception of humans because God made them special is not a real deal breaker relative to the real attacks on Darwin. Okay, so that's evolution. And there, the synthesis approach works very nicely. We don't have a lot of problems. Dinosaurs, I can't leave without talking about dinosaurs. And I think with dinosaurs we'll probably conclude. The hour is getting late. But I love dinosaurs. That's a picture of 3 of my kids kind of in front of the dinosaurs at the American Museum of Natural History. I'm a big dinosaur fan. I literally have dinosaur fossil cufflinks on today to give you an idea. I'm a dinosaur guy. When I was little, I knew every dinosaur species by heart. And by the way, science betrayed me once again because like all of them have changed. I'm now wrong about all of them. But you know they got rid of Brontosaurus for 20 years and then brought it back? It was one of the happiest days of my life. Brontosaurus went the way of Pluto, but then it came back, so there's hope for Pluto. In any event, how about dinosaurs? What do we do with dinosaurs? Well, first of all, the Torah has no problem with dinosaurs. Giant monster creatures, that is our thing. We love giant monster creatures. They're everywhere. All throughout the Medrash, all throughout the Talmud, everything is a giant monster creature. Literally, we have so many great ones. We have a giant ox monster called the Re'aim. The Re'aim is so big that it's described in the Talmud as being the size, when it's 1 day old, the size of Mount Tabor. I don't know how big Mount Tabor is, but pretty big. The Talmud then, because the Talmud's fantastic, if you ever get a chance to study Talmud with the rabbi or with any of the staff here at the Chabad, you will have such an adventure. The Talmud then asks the question that is in the backs of your minds that you don't want to ask. That's what the Talmud usually does. The Talmud is that voice in the back of your head that asks that question you were too embarrassed to ask yourself. The Talmud says, how do you fit something that big on the ark? And the Talmud answers, you put its head in. And it kind of dog paddles, or I don't know, dinosaur paddles behind the back of the table, behind the back of the ark. The Talmud then says, if something is the size of a mountain, its head is too big for the ark too. Head's not going to fit. So the Talmud says, you know what they did instead? They put its nose in the ark and it used it as a snorkel. So the ark was a snorkel for it while it paddled behind the ark. The Talmud then asks, how do you keep it attached? There's currents. It would blow away. And so they said that they took the horns of this giant ox monster and tied it to the sides of the ark to make sure that the snorkel was secured during the period of the flood. That's right. The Talmud's that much fun. So giant ox monsters? Sure. Would they leave behind giant fossils? Absolutely. Is a Brontosaurus a giant ox monster? Why not? I mean, really, why not? We have a giant fish monster, plesiosaur anyone? Giant fish monster. We have the Leviathan. I'm sure you've heard of the Leviathan. I have a quote on the screen, Leviathan. We have giant fish monsters. Would they leave behind giant fish monster dinosaur skeletons? Absolutely, sure. So we're fine with it. How about, this is one people never know. Anybody here know about the Ziz? People never know the Ziz. Yeah, I see a couple Ziz fans, finally. I had to come all the way to Southern California to get people who know the Ziz. Nice job. The Ziz never gets mentioned, but it should. It's one of our coolest. The Ziz is a giant bird monster with a wingspan that can block out the sun. Pterodactyls! We have no problem at all with there being giant monsters that used to exist that left behind fossils. Once again, the problem is really time. How long it takes. We radiometric date fossils. We don't carbon date them. It's not important to know that. It's a little bit of it's a little pedantic, but it's just fun to say. Pedantry is fun, can be. And that is that we can't carbon date fossils because there's no carbon in fossils. The way that fossilization usually works is by perimineralization. Perimineralization is that all of the carbon in a fossil, all of the carbon in a bone, all of the carbon in a bone, if you put it in sedimentary kind of water or volcanic ash or whatever, it will dissipate over time. You lose the carbon. Try this at home. Take a chicken bone and drop it into real hard water. You guys have hard water down here? Where I live in Muncie, the Culligan man came to my house for water softening, and he took a sample and he said my water was so hard I should wear a helmet when I shower. That's hard water. So if you have hard water, there's a lot of sediment in the water. Drop a chicken bone in the cup of hard water. Wait about, I don't know, 100 million years. Try this at home. Wait 100 million years. And you'll find that each piece of carbon from the bone has dissipated and been replaced by a piece of silica or sediment that goes exactly in the shape of the bone. That means that every fossil we have, fossilization is not bones, fossilization is the mineralization of bone. So we have here perfect copies, carbon copies, not really. We have literally the opposite. But we have here exact copies of carbon-based bone in the form of rock, which means we have to date the rock, which isn't that hard. Not for us it might be hard. For them it's not that hard. Just radiometric date the rock instead of the carbon, it's fine. Anyway, when we do use radiometric dating to date these fossils, they come up hundreds of millions of years old. That's not an enormous problem for us. We can use the synthesis method of the age of the universe, that's fine. But at the same time, fossilization takes a very long time. And one possibility, I guess, is that during the 6 days of creation, God sped up the creation and the destruction and the fossilization of dinosaurs, but that doesn't really work with our giant monster species in the Torah. So this one requires a little bit more work, I think, to make it work properly. I have a quote here from the Rebbe on the screen, a letter that he wrote in English, and I kid you not, people write the funniest letters to the Rebbe, and one of the letters somebody wrote to the Rebbe, this is an English letter, so the English here is original. Somebody wrote to the Rebbe saying, I really want to be a religious Jew, I feel my Judaism, I love it. I got a problem, dinosaurs. If you can get dinosaurs out of my way, I can be a Jew, but otherwise I'm stuck on the dinosaur problem. So the Rebbe writes back, that's real unfortunate, let me help you get dinosaurs out of the way. And the Rebbe says in the letter, I'm not going to give an answer as to what the Torah thinks about dinosaurs, I'm just going to give you two plausible explanations that don't cheat the science and don't cheat the Torah. And one of them that the Rebbe brings is this idea I underlined over here. And that is that we cannot exclude the possibility that dinosaurs lived a couple thousand years ago, perhaps before the flood, and under terrific natural cataclysms, fossilized very quickly, and that our radiometric dating of these fossils is incorrect because it has not accounted for terrific natural cataclysms. So the theory here is that perhaps these bones fossilized very quickly, not in 100 million years, but in a couple thousand years. And that when we try to date these fossils, we're off because terrific natural cataclysms can reset an isotopic clock. Guess what? That's absolutely true. That's absolutely scientifically true. I can even give you a couple examples, though I write them down because I never remember the names of these things. We have the Vredeford impact crater in South Africa, where the intense heat and pressure from the impact reset the isotopic clock on those rocks and makes them appear significantly older when we use conventional dating methods than we know them to be. So it's absolutely the case that if you have a big crater impact, a lot of heat, you can reset the isotopes in the sample, make the radiometric dating look wrong, and artificially make something look older than it actually is. This is something that we've demonstrated. You know what else? We can rapidly fossilize things too. Perimineralization can happen in thousands of years instead of hundreds of millions of years. Anybody ever been to the petrified forest in Arizona? Yeah, that petrified forest in Arizona, by the way, full disclosure, science posits that to be millions of years old. However, the current available scientific evidence is that it's process of fossilization, where those trees are fossils. There's no wood in them anymore. They're all silica. Silica went into the space and turned it into basically, I don't know, glass, quartz. They're quartz trees. They're entirely fossilized, down to the rings. It's incredible. No wood. The current available evidence is that that fossilization happened over about 5,000 years. And the reason why is because when volcanic ash buried that forest and then silica water came in, under those conditions, you can fossilize things in thousands of years instead of in millions of years. So we know for a fact, insofar as science has facts, that it is completely possible to rapidly fossilize things if the conditions are weird enough. And we also know that we can artificially make rock look too old if the conditions are weird enough. So when the Rebbe says back here, if conditions are weird enough, you might be off on your numbers, the Rebbe is not saying something that isn't well-established science. Every scientist knows, or most scientists know at least, every scientist worth their salt knows, that you can perimineralize fossils real fast, and you can also reset isotopic clocks and make carbon dating and make radiometric dating off by a certain factor. However, we control for that in science. We control for that. The way we control for it, to make sure that doesn't mess with our data, is we take samples from all around the world. What are the odds that there was a volcanic eruption everywhere at once? So it's true, this piece of rock is artificially old, but we can check other places, check other fossils, right? We compare it to other sites. In order to make this theory work, you would need a terrific cataclysmic event that happened across the entire world. If only we had one. We have the biblical flood. And according to the Medrash, you had hot water, boiling water, except immediately around the boat where you had the ox swimming. I will tell you this. I don't believe any scientist has run the numbers yet. Maybe one of you will be the first one to do it. But I've asked many people who do geoscience and do this kind of radiometric dating, just Do the thought experiment with me. If the entire Earth was entirely put under boiling water for 150 days, what would that do to the isotopic clocks? And what would that do to perimineralization? And they go, yeah, that could make things look very old and fossilize real fast. So once again, what have we done here? Is the science wrong? Not even a little bit. Is the Torah wrong? Not even a little bit. It took me a while to find a version of this cartoon that bleeped out the word, by the way. Science will tell you, correctly so I believe, that we can date fossils based on the ratio of parent isotopes to daughter isotopes in any sample, assuming that any subsequent cataclysmic event that could have altered the isotopic ratios was not worldwide and uniform. And that's correct. There's nothing wrong with the science. What does the Torah tell us? A miraculous uniform worldwide flood of scalding water happened for 150 days. Not very different from the age of the universe theory, the one that we use, the synthesis. The science is right, but that's just not how it happened. Turns out there was, according to God, who made the world and made the flood, a terrific cataclysmic event that did affect the entire world uniformly, and just about everybody agrees that if that happened, and we know it did because we're Jews, we believe that you would have an artificially mineralized, fossilized, and young, old, mix-up parent-daughter isotopes looking world. This is the last thing I want to talk to you about, and then I'll take a bunch of questions. Is that okay, Rabbi? Good?
Yeah, I think what I'll do with the questions this time is I'm going to give a 60-second break for those that need to leave, whether they have baby
Absolutely.
or not. And those that want to stay for the question and answer session will stay. So after you finish, if God's trying to confuse us, which he always is, we're going to give 60 seconds for those that need to leave, and then those that want to stay for the bonus time, you go on to this.
Fantastic. All right, so the last thing that I want to point out is that I've painted a real rosy picture, but there is, I believe, a problem with my rosy picture. The synthesis method is nice, but it does posit the existence of a particularly cruel God, God forbid. God wants me to trust him. God tells me what he did. Meanwhile, he left behind evidence that would cause any thinking person to get it wrong. Now, it's true, God expects us to trust the Torah, but at the same time, he put a lot of stuff in the world that looks really old. And we've already explained he had fast forward, but come on! Couldn't you have just made the world the right age, and then I could have done the science and found the right age? Why confuse me? Why leave behind the evidence of how to theoretically make a world instead of just doing it the right way so I wouldn't get stuck? I think that's a fair question. And I want to give you the real answer first and the pretend answer second. And by that I mean, I told you, a rabbi who makes things up, a rabbi who doesn't plagiarize, it's heresy, right? I'm going to tell you the authentic answer, and then I'm going to tell you something that I think. I'm very open about when I make something up. So far, I haven't told you a single thing that I can't source. Starting this slide, I make stuff up a little bit. My own guesses. The authentic answer that is on the books is that we don't know why God does anything. Anything. The Torah is not a book of why. The Torah is a book of how. The Torah doesn't spend much time at all telling us why natural phenomena exist. It really doesn't. L'havdil, almost every other ancient religion, its entire purpose is to tell you where the sun came from and why it's there. Or where the mountains came from and why they're there. Or why there are earthquakes. God has exactly one natural phenomena that he tells us why it's there, and it's a rainbow. Other than that, we have no whys in the entire Genesis. Our faith does not require us to know why God does things. A Jew does not ask, why did you make the sun? A Jew asks, how do I use the sun to best fulfill my purpose on this earth? We're a how people, we are not a why people. Not that why is a treif question, God forbid, but it's not going to have a lot of answers in the Torah. The authentic answer to this is, I have no clue why God did this. That's the truth. The truth is, not a clue. I don't know why the basic matter of the physical universe is the atom and not something else. I don't know why the mountains are so high or why the ocean is so deep. I don't know. And it's okay that I don't know. The Torah doesn't tell me, and I guess when Mashiach comes, maybe God will fill me in. I don't know. That's the real authentic answer. However, here comes the guess. I have a guess as to why God might have left it behind. Because according to the synthesis approach, God left behind all of the evidence on how to make a world from scratch using the processes of nature, even though he didn't do it that way. And I think it's quite possible that God left that behind for me to use. Because God expects me to use the physical universe, and as we learned earlier at the very beginning, expects me to use the science. We have a scientist at the Rockefeller University who recently developed maybe 2 years ago, developed one of the first synthetic antibiotics. Most antibiotics come from bacteria, or from fungi. That is, the things that God made naturally create things that are meant to kill their neighbors. As bacteria want to live alone, they create poisons that kill bacteria next to them so that they can live all by themselves. And we take those and we turn them into antibiotics to kill the bacteria that's inside, hopefully, none of our bodies. However, one of the first synthetic antibiotics is now in clinical trials. And this synthetic antibiotic was made in the following way. We have a lot of evidence for how bacteria evolved the ability to fight off other bacteria, for how antibiotics should have evolved. We know that God hit fast forward, but he left behind all of the evidence for how to evolve a bacterium, how to evolve antibiotics. One of the researchers at the Rockefeller University fed this into a computer algorithm and told the computer, hey, here's how evolution should work. And then gave it a hypothetical goal and said, evolve in theory, in computer, not in reality. Don't worry, we didn't make like superbugs. Use the computer to hypothetically evolve the antibiotics that we want. And it worked. Is it possible that God left behind the evidence on how to evolve things in the hope that we would actually evolve things in order to make the world a better place, to develop new medications? I don't see why not. I'll give you another one. Radiometric dating. Had it not been for God putting very old bones in the ground, not bones, fossils in the ground, we would have never figured out, probably would have never figured out radiometric dating, or really how radioactive isotopes work at all. The entire field of radioactive science, which isn't how you say it, comes from paleontologists. People saw giant monster bones in the ground and said, oh, we gotta figure out where these things came from, and figured out a way to reliably figure out how old something is. This basic method is something that we have used for incredibly productive purposes. We are Jews, or Jew friends, I have no idea. We're Jews, probably, a lot of us, and the Jewish people firmly believe that the land of Israel belongs to us inherently. That God made the entire universe and chose to give us the land of Israel and nobody else, and that's why it's ours. Only because of that. However, at the same time, it's nice to have some evidence, isn't it? So we dig around in the ground and we find ancient potsherds and ancient pieces of material that have Hebrew on them and use radiometric dating, first developed by paleontologists, to demonstrate that we really were there thousands of years ago. Is it possible that God put giant dinosaur fossils in the ground in the hope that somebody would develop radiometric dating and then use it to confirm our right to the land of Israel? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. How about another one? How about another one? Sure. They're all on the screen. Whenever I mention climate change in a room, in any room, about half the room hates me. But the half of you who doesn't, allow me for a moment. It certainly is getting hotter in here, at least. And sea levels certainly do rise, and we have cataclysmic events happening that are hurting people on the coasts. One of the ways that we figure out when a terrible storm is going to come or when sea levels are going to wipe out a coastal community is by radiometric dating of coral reefs. These radiometric dating methods have saved thousands of lives and continue to save thousands of lives. Is it possible that God put giant dinosaur fossils in the ground, hoping we would develop radiometric dating so that we could save coastal cities and people who live in them by dating coral? I don't know, maybe. And finally, all of radiomedicine, the entire field of radiology, owes its existence to paleontology. These methods that we use every day to help people get better, to fight off cancers or to figure out what's going on with disease, radio tracers in medicine, that entire field of radiology ultimately comes from the basic discoveries that happened because people looked at dinosaurs in the ground and said, ooh, I'd love to know how old those are, let's date them. And once they dated them, used those methods and then applied them to fields of medicine. Is it possible that God put giant dinosaur things in the ground to make me go, huh? That's fascinating. Maybe I can develop a method to create new medicine, to make the world a better place. These are just some examples, but I think, as a broader approach, that perhaps God left behind the evidence for how to make a world from scratch in the hope that we would do it. That we would make the world a better place. I think that's what science is supposed to do. I think that's what Torah is supposed to do too, and there we don't have any disagreements at all. All right, thank you all very much.